Well, hello folks, and welcome to episode 251 of Retropower Uncut. And I'm here, no Cal this week, I'm doing the whole lot. Got my best shirt on, as you can see. I've ironed it carefully for the job. I thought I'd put one of my new ones on though, because my other one was looking a little bit rough. And we're going to get straight in with the E-Type. So, George and Scott are actually working on it right now. Now I'm going to let George elaborate a bit further on what's been going on the front end of this, on his little bits up in the CAD Cave. But basically they've got the bonnet inner and outer attached to each other with a good degree of success, which is nice, and they're now doing all the faffing about basically of putting it onto the front of the car, which is quite a lot of a faff on an E-Type. With a standard front end it's a lot of a faff. It's actually less of a faff with this because it's a lot lighter. The problem is they're shimmed anything from 0 to 5/8 of an inch, both vertically and fore and aft. And you can get an E-Type from the factory with no shims, and you can get an E-Type with 5/8 of shims in both directions, and the holes are slotted for side-to-side adjustment. And they can be shimmed differentially one side to the other to steer the whole front end. So there's basically about 7 miles of adjustment in every direction on the front of one of these, and it takes a while to get that adjustment somewhere in the realms of where it needs to be. So that's what's going on at the moment, which when you've made all of that assembly from scratch, obviously that adjustment, working out whether that's an adjustment that would have been in the case anyway from the factory, or whether it's an adjustment that you've created by inaccuracy of the parts you've made, is a bit challenging. But things are looking pretty good. I've just had a quick glance with them, and it's actually the bits that make me nervous, which are the junction of the front end, the bonnet, to the bulkhead, where our carbon part, when it's finished, is going to join the steel part, and that's pretty critical. You're not join as in a permanent joint, but a shut line between the two. That's looking good, and that's an area that on the original car the steel would have been filed. The back edge of the bonnet is an open edge, that would have been filed to match the bulkhead. That would have all been made to fit basically, but this is looking very good. Now we're going to be able to sand that back edge. George is getting some detail down now actually, which will confer to the to KS when they make the final parts on this. But yeah, that's the situation with that. That's all looking very, very good. Really pleased with that. Scott's been getting on, finishing the bits I'd made a half-hearted attempt at starting, basically, which were the coolant pipes. I kind of got them started, but obviously a million and one things to do. I've not actually got very far with them, other than working out how they were going to go. So Scott's got both of those fabricated now. He's done the water pump intake pipe, which feeds from the outlet of the oil cooler to the water pump intake, and then he has also done the radiator lower hose, which goes from the bottom of the radiator to the oil cooler inlet. So he's got all that made up. That looks really good. It's quite a complicated, convoluted bit of fabrication, and it goes through all sorts of bends by necessity, because it has to clear an oil feed line and clear the front part of the chassis and all sorts of things. Jamie's B-roll footage will cover all that very well. You'll be able to see how all that fits, so that's great. Additional to that, Scott's also got the remote filter head mounted onto the front of the chassis, onto the picture frame as it's called on an E-Type, onto the front of the chassis, and then he's worked out how the oil lines are going to go. I think we're going to mount them with some 3D printed clamps to the steering rack actually, just to keep them out of the way. But he's worked out how they're going to go, worked out what angle fittings we need to be able to get them onto the outlet of the oil cooler, and onto the front of the engine block. So the I think outlet of the oil pump. Am I getting this the right way around? Yes, I think I am. Yes, because the oil pump, the oil pump draws from the sump, pumps out, pumps through the oil cooler, and then out, and then it will now then go through our remote oil filter head and back into the front of the block and deliver straight into the main oil gallery. The oil cooler arrangement on these, as standard from the factory, the oil pump draws from a normal pickup pipe in the sump. When it pumps to the cooler, it also pumps obviously via an oil pressure relief valve. The oil pressure relief valve's outlet delivers its relief oil directly back to the oil pickup pipe above the oil in the sump. So it priority feeds the pump with bypass flow from the pressure relief valve, but the pressure relief valve is after the cooler. So what you get is a delivery of cooled oil into the oil pump intake as a priority, and it's actually quite a sensible system because it means that when you're working at high bypass rate, which is what you'll be doing at high RPM and high load, and the point when you're heating your oil up a lot, your priority flow from the bypass is back into the pump with cooled oil. So actually, the system's actually very well thought out. People criticise the E-type, the V12 oiling system from a point of view of oil cooling, and people rush into putting an external oil-to-air cooler on, which is simply piped into the main flow, without realising that actually the bypass flow setup for the pressure relief and the cooler is actually very well thought out. It means that it doesn't overcool the oil when you haven't got much bypass flow, but it does cool the oil at high bypass when the oil's under a lot of load and the oil pump is at high RPM, so the oil pump is pumping a lot of oil. You get a lot of bypass. That's when it goes through the cooler and it prioritises that cooled oil back into the pump. So it makes a lot of sense. As you can see in the background, George is literally just trial fitting his Jigsaw puzzle 3D printed inlet manifold parts, because that's another area where, you know, he knows it all fits in CAD, but you can't beat the reality of just sort of trying the bits on the engine there. You know, as with all of these things, you kind of build a problem up in your head based on what you're looking at on a screen, and when you come to the reality of putting things together, the bits you were stressing about and worrying about are dead easy, and the bits you hadn't foreseen are the problems, and you can't beat actually doing the thing in front of you, because that's where you suddenly, your reality gets tipped on its head when you actually come to put the things together. So anyway, I think that pretty much sums up where we're at on E-Type. I've probably skated over things to do with all the carbon trimming and itchiness and all sorts of things there. I'll let George elaborate a bit more, because he's been getting a bit hands-on as well down in the workshop, getting some bits to fit. So yeah, I'll let him talk about that a bit as well. Moving on from there, we have Wasabi, and I'm going to hand over to Bobby on that. As you can see, all sorts of things going on this, many fronts, but a lot of fabrication finishing has occurred at the rear end, so I'm going to let Bobby talk about that.
Hello everyone, hey, welcome back from the metal shop. So fast forward from last week, I pretty much complete everything from the back seat installation. What I've been busy with was the strikers for the folding seats. Yeah, so they were folding in the free space, so I had to create a mounting place where they can. These are just a bolt. And then we had this gap from the end of the seat up to the quarter panel. This is not finished yet, because we're about to figure out what sort of speakers we're going to use. So we'll have a mounting speakers here, and once I have the dimensions of the speakers, I can design and fabricate the final closure here. So that will complete the whole lot. But then, yes, from the future quarter cards to the seat, we got that big gap. And what I done was to fabricate these infill bits, which are just a base, and on them the James, our trimmer, he will upholstery guy. Sorry, James. He will build up this with the foam, so it will come up to level and the shape with the seat, and then that will just go all the way to where the door cards would be. So this is literally just a base plate. It's locked in here with a pin, and there's a pin there, so it's very easy to remove afterwards. So that's done for both sides, and I moved on finally to do some engine assembly, I would guess, stuff. So some mechanical jobs, and we'll go to the table so I can point what I've been doing now. Right, so fast forward to the engine. I had to remove the engine and the transmission of the car, so I can split them, and we have to figure out what starter we're going to use, because we got different combination with the engine. Before it was the 4.2 V8 engine. Now, yeah, so this is a 5-cylinder straight 5-cylinder. So yeah, we have to determine the engine, the starter motor, and doing an investigation on this. Also, we have to figure out the the exact air conditioning compressor as well, because there are different variations between the models and years, and all that we need the exact one. So I've been doing that. Also, we already bought some very nice machine bits. For top of my head, I can't remember where we bought them from, but this is the thermostat housing, and this is the oil filter adapter thing as well, and they're very important for us because we're going to have to mount the engine mount, the fabricated engine mount, which the engine mount is going to be mounted to the block, and also it will share, I would guess, 3 bolts, which will kind of, the engine mount will sandwich the oil housing, and then we'll go forward to where it should be. So we really needed these bits, though they're here. What we're waiting for is the oil pan. We managed to find a very nicely fabricated and engineered oil pan, and the girdle, that bit here. So because we're struggling with the height, we thought about doing our own design, but actually we managed to find a ready-made one, which they reduced the girdle height to about half of the original one, and also the pan as well, because the pan is for a longitudinal conversion across different Volkswagen and Audi cars. So that was a win-win situation. We just wait for that to come. And what else I'm doing is I just also measure a spigot bearing for where the transmission engage, the transmission input shaft engage with the crankshaft as well. I measure all this. There's also different in the crankshaft between the different engines. This one is with 2, this one is with 6 holes. I think, if I'm not mistaken, there's one with 7 holes. So I had to check this before we go and either order or make our own flywheel. So I'm taking just different measurements here on the gearbox side as well. Yeah, so pretty much just confirm different stuff. We were missing, because when we bought the engine it was just a bare block and the head. So we were missing the vacuum pump, so we got a second-hand vacuum pump as well. We're waiting for a nice machine piece, which is the water coolant inlet for head, which will connect from here up to the thermostat housing. We're waiting for that bit as well, because this is a little bit bulky, and we're not sure if that's not going to hit the forward bulkhead. Maybe not. We'll clear it. It's not a big deal, because we can always make a notch there. I think that's for now, and we'll catch up next week for more. Thank you very much.
Right. So thank you for that, Bobby. Moving on from that, we'll go and have a look at a BMW E9, where Stu is beavering away on the front end, literally as we speak, and he's and he's cursing mildly. You know, he's actually got a pretty good fit of the bonnet to the front panel now. And I can't remember what I elaborated on the front of this last week, but we had a bit of a difference in height between the middle here and the middle of the bonnet. And basically we can't change the bonnet because it's made out of carbon fibre, and to be honest, looking at it, I think we all agreed that actually the bonnet shape looked pretty good. Not knowing the exact profile of the front of one of these bonnets in that way, we don't know what that should be because we haven't got a factory original one to work from. But we're pretty confident that that profile looks good. You know, by eye, looking at it, it all looks good. But this steel front panel was of the order of 8mm probably high in the middle. So took the course of action, the only sensible course of action, which is to lower that by 8mm, which meant slitting the back of the panel, slitting the inside the shut, splitting that, taking out the, basically allowing the panels to overlap, getting that pulled down until it lined up with the bonnet. And once it was pulled down to line up with the bonnet, then scribing out the line where they overlap, cutting off, snipping off the overlap section, and then butt welding all that back together. And there's been a couple of to's and fro's on that, in that you kind of do it all, and then another bit moves a bit, and another bit moves a bit, and it needs a bit of filing, and a bit of titivating, and a bit of grinding back, and then re-welding. So Stu's had that tacked, untacked a few times, just getting all that levelled up. He's got it all levelled up, he's got it all welded now, and that's all looking pretty good. These end sections, there'll be a bit of adjustment on those yet, because where these areas here are welded to the wings. That's going to all move a little bit. So don't read too much into the fit at the ends. That will change a little bit anyway yet. The main bit was getting the middle right, because we can't move that middle. You know, where that is where that is. You can't move that once that's all set. The ends will have a reasonable amount of flex, but the middle won't. So that's all looking pretty good. And Stu's working now on getting the end fits of this, because they're a slightly strange, very Carmen sort of arrangement on the ends of this front valance, where the valance is welded to the front panel up until the wing joint line here, and then at the end they just have an overlap with no weld, where it's just a gap where they just sit over the wing. A nice gap to fill with water and mud. It will all run out of the bottom of the valance, but it is a very strange arrangement. But anyway, that's how it goes. That's what they were like on the original car, so that's what it'll be like on this car. But Stu's just doing a grind and fit of that, because the ends of this were very slightly distorted in transit, but they also aren't quite the right shape for the wings, and we know the wings are good. The wings are definitely a BMW original part, and it doesn't quite fit that. So there's a little bit of shaping to be done there. So yeah, good progress all round really. Just lots of sheet metal fettling and trying to make bits fit neatly, and having the carbon parts which don't change shape and don't move and just sit there is very useful, because they give us a solid point to align things to. As I say, rightly or wrongly in terms of shape, it gives us a nice point to align things to. And yeah, progress is good, things are looking good, everything's coming along well. In the background, Nitron are building us some dampers for this. That's purring along in the background. We've got some dimensional questions on the front units, which I need to resolve. But basically, this is having E30 M3 front struts and E30 M3 rear coilover conversions fitted to this, which will give us the suspension setup we want. So we're just waiting for those to be able to progress the rear turrets, which I mentioned last week. That's pretty much where we're at with that. Moving on to Aston Martin. I've actually been working on this a bit with Matt. We've had some exciting times on a couple of things. Matt's been working on getting some of the last bits of the sheet metal that he could do buttoned up. So he's finished off the last parts of the floors where he could do those. Luke will elaborate on what he's been doing, but he's been working on this as well. And his work will enable us to proceed with the next major chunk of sheet metal on this. Matt has put the roof back on. As you can see a change here, not permanently, this is just popped on. It's a bit of a swine to get on and off because it's clinched round, so we have to kind of bend the sides out. But he's put that on and just screwed that in place, so that he could then curve these roof brace sections, which are like a set of top hats that are all spot welded together, which were made by ASR for us, just because they know all the detail of them again. So Matt's got those, put them through the rollers to get the curvature onto them, and done a nice job of that. They now fit pretty much perfectly to the roof skin. They will have, we'll use a closed cell neoprene foam to pack between those and the roof, so that won't hold water, but it will just pack that gap and make a nice job of that. I'm going to take that one out. At this point, I'm just going to do a little, I nearly knocked this section out, so I can show you the section that Matt's curved, because I nearly just knocked it out. So yeah, that's one of the sections for the roof area. And so that just acts as a little brace and a little support to stop the roof drumming. And so on this surface here, we'll put some neoprene closed cell foam onto that. And as I say, Matt's put that through the rollers just to get that curved to the shape of the roof. So nice job there. And then we moved on to the roll cage. Now, after a bit of debate with the customer for this car, we concluded that we did want to fit a roll cage to it, just to beef up the fact that the roof frame is incredibly flimsy on this, and it's going to be quite a powerful, quite a heavy car. Just thought we'd like to add a little bit of the safety factor into it and a little bit more stiffness to the upper structure. So we've set to and started work on the roll cage, which is going to be quite a challenging job because we want to try and hide it as much as is physically possible. So we've really made this lot as snug as is physically possible. We've got this pillar this tube to follow the forward edge of the rear window, so it's not completely hidden by the trim section on the rear window, but it's very close to being hidden by that trim section, so it's really snug there. That's very snug down the pillar, and then the bottom part of that will disappear into this reinforcement box that supports the bottom part of the pillar. There's a big long oval teardrop cutout in that for that tube to disappear into, so we will then weld this to the chassis underneath the tube, the cage, and then this box will then close around it and be welded up and smoothed off, so it looks like that cage disappears into the structure of the body shell there. And we've then made these front legs, which are probably the most awkward front legs I've done, because we've rolled and bent them. So we put the bends in for the top of the A post, and we put a bend in at the bottom where it has to tip inwards to follow the A pillar line. We're then bracing these in with some boxes at the bottom onto the H frame that is the main support structure in the bulkhead that ties down onto the chassis. So we're not going to have a very bottom part on the tube leg, it's actually going to tie into that H frame, because that H frame's already 75 by 50mm box section, it's pretty robust stuff, so that's going to tie in there. But then, as you can see here, we've rolled the tube to follow the curvature of the A posts, and we've also rolled the tube to follow the curvature of the door top here as well. So this is all very much a work in progress, but so don't assume this is finished yet. But we've basically put a roll on both of those sections. We put the bends in, and then we put it through the roller in between the bends to put the curvature in to try and follow the pillars as tightly as we possibly can. It's pretty challenging. To get them that close is quite tricky, and we also have to bear in mind that obviously if we get them too close in places, then A, we won't be able to get coating in there properly, and B, we won't be able to trim. Now, we're not going to try and trim around the tube on this, we're actually going to infill around the tube and then basically make the pillar larger effectively by putting some infill sections either side of the tube. So that's the plan there. I'm going to wait for Cal to come back, and then we'll have a bit more of a conflab between Cal, between James, who's going to have to do the trim work, and me, and also the customer, so that we can evaluate the best way of doing all the trim work on this and work all that out, because there's going to be a bit of fiddling around to try and get all that to look really neat. But yeah, that's all coming together reasonably well. There's just it's been a bit in at the deep end for Matt on the roll cage work, because he's not done a lot of cage tube type work before, so that's been a bit in at the deep end for him, working with me, working that stuff out. But yeah, we're making good progress on this. I think we are, once we've got the bulkhead in, which is what I'm going to let Luke talk you through. We've had a bit of a design to and fro on that, and he'll talk you through how we've been working on getting the HVAC incorporated into the bulkhead. But we've done quite a lot of work on that, and that's at a good point now where Matt's going to do a little bit more trimming and alteration of this H-frame, and then we can really start the fabrication work on the bulkhead. That'll be exciting, because once the bulkhead is fabricated, the structural strength will be there to support the front of the chassis. At that point, it's physically possible for us to put this car onto its wheels, and we need to make some wheels for it first. We're going to make some temporary wheels. Once we've made those temporary wheels, it will actually be physically possible to roll this car around on its wheels, which will be pretty exciting. So watch this space on that one. We're not quite there yet, but it's getting surprisingly close to that. I think at that point on that, I will briefly mention body shop, where Gaz has been wrapping up a few loose ends. He's just been finishing off the polishing on the Golf and the reinstallation of trim on the Golf. He has been finishing off some paintwork for the Den, getting some Subaru parts painted for the Den. He's done some other bits of paintwork for the Den, little bits and bobs. He's got a bit of paintwork waiting for the Den, but we're waiting for a part to be able to finish that batch of parts. And he has just done a little bit of reparatory work on the Morris, where there was a little bit of stone chip damage. He's just been finishing off a job on that. So he's been wrapping up a lot of loose ends, really. He's got to that bitsy stage again now, where there's just lots and lots of little bits to finish off and wrap up. That pretty much says where the body shop's at. As I say, it's unfortunately not a particularly exciting week paintwork wise really on that one. There may be a few weeks like that, because we've not really got another massive job to throw straight into. I mentioned the other E-Type. There's a few little complications on that one, so I'm not even going to go into that, because we won't be working on that bonnet just yet, let's put it that way. It needs more than a little bit of paint prep. There's a chunk of work to do on that before we can get into paint prep, that's for sure. So at that point, I think I'm probably going to hand over to me and we'll go through assembly shop and go through the jobs in there, because Adam has very kindly done me a list of all of the stuff that I need to talk about in there, because again, I'm reasonably aware of some of the things, but not completely aware of all of them. So over to me. Well, thank you, me. And here we are in the assembly shop. And once again, Adam has done me a list, because there is an immense amount of things that have happened this week in the assembly shop. So I'm going to get thoroughly lost trying to remember all of them. So I have a list, and even then, it's actually going to be quite tricky because there is an awful lot going on. So the first thing we're going to mention in the assembly shop is that our work experience girl has finished. She did Monday and Tuesday this week. She had a great time, and she wrote us a little thank you letter, which I have to say I was extremely touched by, and actually started to well up a little bit reading it. That was extremely nice of her, and it was very much appreciated by all the guys. That's we put that on the work WhatsApp group so everybody could see it, and it's clipped up in reception so everybody can see it, and we really appreciated that, so thank you. And her abilities for somebody very young, for somebody of 14, were extremely good. She's been very helpful. She's actually achieved a reasonable number of jobs in here. She's worked with various people around the business. She spent a little bit of time on Monday in the fabrication workshop with Scott, and we did a bit of weld tuition in there. So she did a little bit of MIG welding, a little bit of TIG. So that was really good. So Sarah had a bit of time in there. She spent quite a lot of time in here with Gibbo, doing various assembly work. I had a bit of time with George Sinclair as well, doing a bit with him. So she's had a bit of a flavour of quite a lot of the business, and I think she definitely really enjoyed it. I can see that. And then that brings us neatly to the Camaro, because a number of jobs were done on this, but one of them was a bit more of a shakedown run. So undoubtedly Jamie will have another little bit of footage, but this went out for another bit of a road test. Just to wrap up a couple of things that I'll come on to in a minute, that were post the last shakedown. And the benefit of that was that our work experience girl got the chance to have a little pop up the road in a Camaro, which I think made her day as well. She was grinning from ear to ear when she got back from that little road test. So I think that really made her time here definitely worthwhile. So yeah, Adam took this out on another road test just to check up on some of the little niggles were resolved, which they were, I believe, as far as I'm aware. So yeah, on to business. Yeah, we had a few things. One was that the idle wasn't quite right on this. Now the cam that's in these does give you a bit of a lumpy idle, but we were getting slightly foul plugs. We checked the fuel pressure and something had happened in terms of the fuel pressure. We don't really know when that got adjusted or what, but the fuel pressure was set a little bit high, just a wee bit high. So we wound the fuel pressure back a little bit, back to the spec, back to where it should be, and that's solved the slightly rich running idle issue, and the plugs are now staying clean, so that's good. So the plugs are whipped out, clean those. We noticed there was a very slight oil leak from one of the cam covers. We don't really know why, because it was a factory gasket in there, but the cam covers had been off to change them for these dress-up ones, so it's probably something to do with that. We don't really know, but anyway, it's had a new cam cover gasket on it, and that solved that. So we don't really know, because there didn't appear to be anything wrong with the old one, but then the new one's on now, and that's all fine. So Gibbo sorted that out, again, ably assisted by our work experience girl. So that was all done, so really happy with all that. We gave the brakes and the clutch another bleed. There was Adam had a slight concern over the clutch feel. It didn't quite feel like it was as clean as it should be. So they've had another bleed, and apparently that does now feel better. There was a tiny bit of play in the steering column. Now it's an off-the-shelf American steering column in this. A hot rod type, a generic hot rod type steering column, which was bought from the States. Notice there was a little bit of play in it, and when the investigation was done on that, it was found to be in the lower bearing. There was a tiny bit of play. It's basically a nylon disc, if you like, a nylon plain bearing that the column runs through with an O-ring in it, which I guess seals it, but appears that the O-ring was basically what was giving the column its fit in the bush, and without the O-ring it was actually a little bit loose in the bush, and that's not really a very good way of achieving a proper fit. And given that we've got plenty of length to play with in the bottom of the outer column where that bushing fits, we had a brief discussion, and I'd said to George Sinclair that actually if we machined a slightly longer nylon bushing, we could have a wear band section, a bit like a hydraulic cylinder. You have a wear band section that does the mechanical location and then a separate seal. So he's just machined a new lower column piece in acetal, actually not nylon, with a sort of like a 3/4 inch-ish wide wear band that the column sits in as a bearing, and then below that there's a slightly larger bore with a groove to retain the O-ring, which acts as the water seal to prevent the water coming up the column. So that's now a much more professional solution than the one that the column was supplied with, which was a bit half-arsed would be the term I would use. So that's now sorted, so pleased with that. What else have we got on here? The door pin height, that was adjusted, yeah. And then a bit of fiddling around with door release mechanisms. Basically there were just various things, the differences in how the door's released, the different amounts of play in the release handles, things. So basically just adjusting rods and getting the door mechanisms all working nicely and consistently, and all sort of everything being even and everything sitting right on the doors. And then various little snags, dash related snags on here, little bits and bobs, a telltale not working, things like that. Just ironing out all the little niggly little bits that you're always going to find in the early days of getting a car running. But we are very, very close to this being an all working machine now. As I say, we've got to get a few little painted bits back on, a couple of minor adjustments of things, but it's all pretty much in the sort of state it needs to be in to do some more road testing. Really, that's the next thing, is really getting some more miles on it. We don't want to put some of the trim, like the big cover panel that's missing from the centre of the engine bay, we don't really want to put that back on until we're fairly certain that nothing's going to come back out, because obviously each time you put it in and out there's risk of paintwork damage, and etc, etc. So yeah, all coming together really well. Really not going to be too long until this is ready for handover, I have to say. I should imagine we're going to have a very excited customer soon, because this is getting extremely close to that stage. On that note, I think we'll move on. I'm going to wander this way, and I'm going to dwell down here and gesticulate in to my left and right, because some work has been going on the Jensen, and I will have to consult my list again. The first step that was done on that has brought up some slightly irritating problems, but not unforeseen. Just goes to show the number of ways that something can go wrong. When we dry built that car, we dry built it with the differential that was supplied with it, bearing in mind that we received this car as a part built project. And it was a Ford 9-inch based rear end, which is a Heights rear end, which uses a Far Eastern made pig's head for the diff. So it's a Ford 9-inch cast iron pig's head for the diff, but it's, as I say, it's a Far Eastern made one, and the casting is of a certain shape. We have replaced that on the advice of the axle builder, Hauser Racing, with a proper Strange, the American manufacturer, a Strange casing, which is of a more reputable build. He was much more confident in using that casing and recommended that that's a good idea. So getting back to cutting to the chase, so we've received our new differential, built all that into the rear end, got all that built into the car, gone to install the rear brakes, and the handbrake calipers are a separate assembly on this. There's a main rear caliper and a separate handbrake caliper. Well, the handbrake caliper was dry built with the original Far Eastern made differential housing, and it was very close on the casting ribs. Now we have the replacement differential. The casting ribs foul the calipers. So there's a combination of a fettling of the ribs on the casting and a fettling of the castings of the handbrake calipers in order to make all that fit. All of that necessitates removal of the rear subframe. So it's a little frustrating, however, nobody could really have foreseen it, and all of the decisions were made for the good of the car being better. So it's one of those, it's just one of those things. Everybody's made the right decisions. Unfortunately, we've had to retrace our steps a little bit to get back to where we were, but with better parts. The moral of the story is always just use the best parts to start with. That's the key thing. Don't think, oh, I'll use this one, it's a bit cheaper. Never do that. Just use the best bit to start with, then you only do the job once. So here we are. I hasten to add, that wasn't driven by a customer, that wasn't driven by us. It was just the parts that were used by the previous builders of the car, where we've had to retrace our steps a few times on that one. But anyway, here we are, that's getting done. We have been sorting out the parts for the automatic transmission, which is exit stage left at the moment. That is being built by a reasonably local company that we use for building automatic transmissions. However, we do all the part prep, all the cosmetic part prep for them on that. And that basically involves the fasteners and brackets and the casing. Now the fasteners and brackets have been prepared here, ready for plating and Xylan coating. The Xylan coating, which is the black finish that we use, which is a PTFE based coating, that is carried out by East Midlands Coating, so almost literally a stone's throw from us here. They're just up the road, do a great job. So we've prepped the parts for them, they go over to them, they give them a final little blast, and then they spray the coating and bake it. It's a high temperature baked plastic coating effectively, but it's PTFE. And then secondary is the main casing of the gearbox, which is just here. Now, this won't fit in our B-Blast cabinet, it's too big. And there's a very nice chap called Michael who runs a business reasonably local to us called MVB Blasting. And he is quite dynamic in his pursuit of the expansion of his business and is looking out for new business possibilities, particularly with regard to dry ice blasting, which is what he visited us about previously. But he'd mentioned about doing vapor blasting and dry glass bead blasting. So I spoke to him, and sure enough, his cabinet is big enough to do that. So he's taken that away, got that done for us, and got that back to us, which is very much appreciated. He's done a lovely job of it. Ignore this pan, this was just used for masking it up and protecting it. Toby had done all the prep on this to mask up all the threads, all the bungs, to prevent too much bead getting inside. Doesn't guarantee no beads got inside, but it will all be jet washed out again afterwards anyway. But we try and prevent most of the bead getting inside, just to limit the amount of potential and just to reduce the requirement on the washing out and reduce the statistical chances of a glass bead staying inside there, basically. But Michael's done a really nice job of that, got that back to us. That's much appreciated. So yes, in terms of bead blasting, vapor blasting, grip blasting, and indeed hopefully fairly soon proper CO2 blasting. So yeah, Michael at MVB Blasting, highly recommended, and a lovely job on that. And yeah, he will hopefully fairly soon be the man to speak to for dry ice blasting. And then moving on from that, just checking I haven't missed too much, the next stage really on that is we need to make the A-pillar gutter trims, the ones that sit underneath the A-pillars. We need to make them fit the body shell. There's a little niggle there in that one side fits fairly well, one side doesn't. I think we've covered a bit of the detail on that before. I started doing a bit of work on it, but I needed to alter the curvature on one of them, which meant I needed to put it into the shrinker, and I can't shrink it because it's got chrome on it. The chrome prevents the shrinker jaws gripping the part. So we've had them chrome stripped now, and we are then able to shrink them. So I'm going to now liaise with George Sinclair, I think, or Toby, I can't remember which one's working on that now, but we're going to have a little heads together and work out a plan for just making them fit. They're actually very, very close. One side's very close, just needs the hole sorting out. The other side, the curvature is very slightly wrong, and that needs tweaking to just make it match the pillar perfectly, and then we need to make sure they clear the doors as well perfectly. So that's all good, that's all in hand, nice progress happening on that. Then we also could talk about Allegros. Now we've got obviously two of them, Allegro 1 and 2. I'm going to briefly talk about this one. again, I'm going to have to consult my list slightly because I'm not fully aware of all of the bits. James has been doing various bits on the interior just with a view to getting this so that we can catch the interior up with the first car. So he's been doing some bits on that and getting it to the stage where the seats couldn't go in. The spanner checks have been done on this one. You'll recall that we were doing some spanner checking on the other car. Well, the spanner checks have now been done on this one. And our work experience girl has helped with both of those and done quite a bit of spanner checking. She worked with George Sinclair on this and then took over and did quite a bit of that herself as well. And then obviously the buddy checks were done on that. And yeah, that was all good. The idle air control valve, we've talked a fair bit about that, so we'll probably I'm talking about Adam's gesticulating to me here, so I'm talking about the wrong cars, but ignore me on which colour's which. They're both Allegros, we'll go with that. I lose track of which car's which. Ah, right, okay. Yeah, well, I haven't said about the drive yet, to be honest. But yes, I'm getting the two cars muddled up a little bit here, so bear with me. I don't know every single detail on these. But yeah, the idle air control valve, which we've talked about quite a lot. We had a lot of toing and froing and all sorts of ups and downs on that, but we've ended up basically using a Honda idle air control valve. There were reasons why we couldn't use the Honda idle air control valve directly, principally because it mounts to the inlet manifold and we no longer have a plenum type inlet manifold, we now have throttle bodies. Most people running throttle bodies don't run idle air control. However, we want to run idle air control with the throttle bodies because these are road cars. Most people with throttle bodies live with the fact that you have to hold the revs up on the throttle for a few seconds after a cold start. We don't want to have to do that because we want our customer to be able to just turn the key and it behave like a road car and idle and do everything from cold, just like your typical road car when you get in your Ford Focus or whatever and it just works. We want to do that with these as well. They're production cars, in inverted commas. That's what we want them to be. So we want to run idle air control with throttle bodies. So there's a whole lot you've seen in the past about making various things to enable that to happen. However, we were struggling with the control of the idle air valves. Now the idle air valves have to flow exactly the right amount of air matched to the engine. And strangely enough, the Honda valves that would have been with these engines originally flowed just the right amount of air for these engines, surprise, surprise. However, they were a bit complicated in how they could fit the rest of the system we'd set up. However, that's been resolved. Luke has done some little bits of design work, we've done a bit of machining, everybody's put in their little bits of input and those valves are now fitted and working, and it's had a little test drive to verify the operation. That was on the other car, as Adam's pointed out to me, but that's had a little test drive up and down the yard, return to idle spot on. The idle from cold is spot on. Jamie's nearly fallen over. Yeah, the return to idle spot on. Everything's working absolutely bang on as far as we can determine. Obviously we can't do cold start because it's summer. And we've had some slightly cooler days this week. We've been down to probably 12 degrees C, 13 degrees C, so we've had a bit more opportunity to do some fairly cold starts. But we're getting pretty close now to the stage where we need to be doing some mapping. A little bit of mapping on the road and a chunk of mapping on the rolling road to get the higher power output stuff done. So yeah, we're getting pretty close to that stage now, so that's all good. Let me check what else I've missed. Not too much really. I think we've done an awful lot of that. There's a little bit of air intake ducting and things being sorted out on that car. Going back to this car again, I forget which ones I'm oscillating between. Work experience girl has actually done a few of the jobs. I'm going to list them here just so that, because she'll be watching this. She's fitted the battery isolator, she's made up the oil breather hoses, she's made up the oil pressure hose, yes, for the pressure sensor, the oil pressure hose that feeds the oil pressure. It's a remote oil pressure sensor for the engine, so she's made that up, and she's fitted the headlights and she's fitted the heat hoses and the clips apparently on this car. I knew she was working on it, but I wasn't aware of all the detail obviously because I've been pretty busy myself. So yeah, that was really much appreciated. She's done a lovely job of that. By all accounts, her work was extremely good. So yeah, really, really happy. And then I'm going to skip very quickly over, I'm not going to walk over there now, the XJC, a little bit of work's been going on that. Basically getting parts ready for coatings. We had the parts returned from Simply Performance for finishing, which I think we touched on last week, the rear hub carriers and the diff. Adam's been, I don't know if it was Adam, somebody's been getting the diff carrier ready for powder coating. That's obviously going to be blasted by BG Pennies, who will do the zinc arc spraying and powder coating. So that needs to be masked up pretty thoroughly, and all the machined faces that need to be protected are protected. So blanking plates have been made up to blank those off. The rear of the diff casing has been blanked with an old, already powder coated diff cover that we use for blanking those off. And then the pinion bearing hole, the pinion hole has been blanked with blanking plates, and everything got ready on that for powder coat. And then I think Steve actually has been doing some work on that as well, getting the fuel tank assemblies ready for fitment. There was a complication on that in that the tanks use some strange threads on the fittings, UNEF or UNES, and I can't remember which that is now, but it's an extremely fine thread. And basically we cannot get any fittings to fit those threads. There are two that are, I'm checking Adam's list here, they're 1/2 inch UNEF, he says on here. So those have now been tapped out to M14 by 1.5, which we can obviously very easily get, so that we can actually blank those fittings off, because we can't find any blanks to fit the 1/2 inch UNEF that those tanks were equipped with originally. So that's now done. So the tanks are now, and then they've been cleaned out, pressure tested, generally checked, so they're ready to go in. And I think Steve's been getting the fuel crossover pipe assembly ready, and the pump installed, and all the bits that will basically enable the tanks to go in and then be linked by their cross-link pipe that allows them to cross-fill and all that sort of jazz that you'll have seen in the many episodes ago when all that was built up at dry build. So that's been going on in the XJC, and I think that probably wraps stuff up for down here. There's more, but I'm not going to waffle on about it all because I have done for quite long already. So at that point, I'm going to hand over to the CAD Cave and let Luke talk you through what he's been doing, and George do a bit more of an elaboration on the E-Type.
Okay, hello, welcome back to the CAD kiosk. So I'm starting this week with excitement in, to be fair, not actually in here, because most of the week me and Scott have been working on the E-Type bonnet and inner bonnet skin, which is not open on my screen, even though I was going to have it open on my screen, but it's not. But yes, we've been doing the task of mating the two together. So a bit of a backstory, we did all the CAD work, I don't even know how long ago, quite a long time ago, for the outside skin of the Project Geneva. That got made as a splash just to test some things, which is what we've been doing. And then later on, we then did a scan work of everything else, then CAD'ed the inner skin, and that came back from KS a couple of weeks ago. Scott's been off, and there's been other things we've been juggling. I've been with Saab, all that kind of stuff. But now we finally got onto it of mating the two together, which has been, safe to say, quite a scary process for me, because it's probably the biggest single part that I've ever done. And obviously both things are from CAD, so it's like if it goes wrong, it's entirely my fault. But no, it's looking like it's good. We've doing the video just on, what is it, Thursday afternoon? No, Thursday morning now. Me and Scott have just test fitted it for the first time, and it looks like it's pretty good. I'm sure Jamie will get some footage of it kind of sat on the car once we put it back on in a minute. But yeah, so that's gone really well. So we've been trimming it in various different ways, because how we've done it to make sure we've got room for error is we've left a load of the edges on both parts long, and that means we can then trim them down piece by piece, and then in theory get it all to fit, which again it appears to be fitting. But Scott's now doing some trimming again right now on that final back edge. It was all gluing last night, so it's progressing nicely. I'm not going to rant any more about it. I'll let the footage that Jamie's no doubt got in the background at the moment kind of do the talking. Also this week I've been on with some Saab stuff. We've got some of the models back actually into Fusion now from EX Model, which is the software I talked about last week. I've now started the process of getting the cooler pack. Actually, this is the wrong file. There we go. So here is the Saab, which you have seen before. Now we've been trying to figure out what cooler pack we're going to run. So our current mentality is probably RS5 forward, RS500 radiator and intercooler, not standard ones, upgraded ones, but based on that, because that's kind of a tried and tested package, and it does kind of fit in the car. We've got a bit of clearance issues, which you can see here, but we was thinking we could maybe just notch this out, or even just shorten the core very slightly. And then this is also the rudimentary frame, which I've kind of been musing with, amongst other things. Obviously I've been on lots of little bits and bobs jobs, but this is the kind of crux of what I've also been doing. But yeah, I'm going to leave it there because there's not really that much to talk about. That says everything that needs to be said. So now I'm going to hand over to Luke, and he's going to fill you with lots of autism and knowledge about the little jobs he's been doing. Thank you.
Hi guys, welcome back. Thank you George for kindly handing over for me to me for once, and also calling me autistic in the same notion. I'm actually standing here with my mug like Nat today, I've just realised. So, end of last week, I was kind of cracking on the list of things that Cal gave me to finish off before he got back from holiday. I was doing really well until both of our 3D printers decided to pack in at the exact same time, which is fantastic. Especially when I think at one point I fixed a 3D printer when George was off, and then George fixed a 3D printer when I was off, and then we realised we didn't have any spare parts for them. So we then had to order said parts and wait for them to come in, and now both 3D printers are fixed. So I was able to prototype, or kind of what I was working on towards the end of last week and what I have been for on and off for a few weeks now, which is a bunch of Churchill roof trim parts, specifically the offside, because I've already printed off the near side of this. Mine are a few tweaks which aren't really going to be impactful to what I'm trying to test. I had done the near side already, printed that off, and then I've mirrored that along with a couple of changes and printed off the offside, because that allows me to test those changes without needing to print the other side again. But that also allows me to install it onto the car. Buzz is currently chewing Jamie's foot off. But that allows me to test what I need in the car and also scan those in situ, because where I've done the trim which kind of goes along the top of the rear windscreen, I want to make sure that that butts up really nicely to these pieces, so when that's all trimmed you kind of have like a really intentional kind of factory looking look to it. So now the 3D printer's working, I can glue those together, put those in the car and get scanning. And then to kind of fill in the gap, I got to start on something which I was really excited for, which I didn't think I'd get to until kind of later on this week, which was the Aston Martin bulkhead. I think just before I went away on holiday, I did a sort of rough out for the sheet metal parts for that and ran it by Nat. And he was like, yeah, this is good, I think this is going along the right lines, but to be completely honest with you, I think we need a bit more information to kind of crack on ahead with the specific design of that, if that makes sense. And so we're now at that point, we have the engine in the car, we have a lot of other things in place now. We're able to take the front of the body on and off the car. So end of last week I did a big scan of the engine in the car with the body on, with the body off, basically all the bits I need to work around. Did a scan of the pedal box, I already had a scan of the HVAC unit, and started off by just kind of creating the rough shape based off what I did beforehand, getting the pedal location in and finalised, taking a bunch of measurements and not actually physically mocking it up in the car and getting somebody to sit in the seat. We had the client down last week as well, so we had kind of rough idea of his seating position, and yeah, just by kind of clamping that pedal box into free space and getting a rough idea of where that needs to sit, I've now landed in a place where I can actually design the bulkhead around that, all the mounting details for that on the one side, and then the much larger pain in the arse is definitely the HVAC. I think you guys would have seen us talk about this across every single build we've ever done, because it always comes down to this point right at the beginning of the build of where the hell do you put this massive unit? And the first person who managed to design a HVAC unit which is half the size but works just as well, you are going to be earning millions, because these things are huge. And we tried many different things. We tried keeping it as one big unit and kind of holding that up on the car and seeing where it could possibly fit, and coming to the conclusion that it's not going to fit anywhere. Then I tried a few different ways of separating it down, like remoting the fan to a different location, holding it up in the car, seeing if it's going to work, bring it back into CAD for the design, kind of going through the notions of testing wheel clearance to it, testing, okay, is this a good idea to put the fan here when it's actually going to be behind a wheel arch? Probably not. And I landed in a place where, through kind of mocking up the shape of the bulkhead first and using the scans, I was able to push the fan right up above the passenger footwell, so it'd be sat underneath the dash, and then the HVAC kind of sits on top of it. And I've come up with a system where the air gets ducted in through the arch vent, down through a panel filter, which is easy to access and replace if you need to, into the fan, and then kind of loops back up round into the HVAC. So all of that is now designed, it's ready for prototype, all the mounting points are in the CAD. So I think I'm going to try catch Adam Mans, maybe Nat later on today, run through anything else that would be bulkhead related that I need to kind of factor in, and then I can start giving measurements and possibly plasma rung out pieces for Matt to actually start building it onto the car, which is very exciting. So I think I am going to leave it there, really. Thank you very much, guys. Cheers.
So thank you very much for that, George. And at that point, we will hand over to the den where Luke is holding the fort, and also let James elaborate a little bit on what's been going on with trim.
Oh, hey Jay, you've caught me out. Been doing my lines what I used to get to do at school when I've been naughty. Anyway, so what we'll do is we'll dispose of that because you don't need to see that. Let's move on, shall we? Welcome everybody back to the den. Nice to see you all. Got our merchandise out on display if you want to have a butcher's at that while you walk past, Jay, with the prices. We also do have a fresh delivery of t-shirts and hoodies, which are all available to be bought through the shop. We've got white t-shirts, blacks, awesome hoodies, so thick. Not as in thick as in stupid, thick as in thickness for warmth. They're great. Let's take you down to the workshop. You'll probably think it's really, really quiet in here this week. It is really, really quiet in here because, as you know, Nick's on holiday and also Owen is on holiday, so it's leaving me on my own to keep myself busy. I've been working on the 633 this week. We had the aircon not working on this vehicle and the heater wasn't working on the vehicle. When the customer dropped it off, we opened the engine bay and he pointed out that we had a bypass pipe fitted to the heater matrix, so totally disconnected and we weren't getting any hot water into the vehicle. So I thought, right, okay, the only reason they'll do that is one, it's leaking, or two, it's blocked. So I decided I'm going to put some water in the heater matrix side in the engine bay to see if we get any flow. Yeah, now that wasn't too great. That didn't work out too well because in the footwell, right behind here, I'm sure Jay will do a photo of it later or a video footage, but up the side there is a heater control valve, manual twist knob style, not electric, and it's missing. So that was why it was bypassing the engine bay, because I didn't want any water pouring into the footwell, which I did. Great, but at least we found a fault. So I will leave that like that for now, and Jay can get some footage of it. I will show you the aircon pump, if Jay would be very kindly walk this way with me. So here is the aircon pump. And this is your aircon clutch, which has decided to leave the chat. It does not want to work anymore. Usually when the clutches destroy themselves, the pump's usually seized. The pump itself, which is this part, turns freely. Wouldn't say freely, there is resistance, you can feel it doing something. And usually what would happen is that would seize up, the engine's turning, and then it would just destroy the clutch to save doing any other damage. This isn't the case on this one, it's just old and broken, a bit like me. Anyway, so yeah, we're going to have a look at getting a refurb for that, because on a 47-year-old vehicle, parts are a little bit difficult to get hold of, as you can imagine. Next, I will take you over to the MGB. So MGF, not MGB, MGF. Now this has, let me just get a torch. This has been over with Harry at Reform Automotive, and he has been welding up some rusty bits, seam sealing bits, and putting a coating on the underside. I think it was Raptor that they used on the underside to protect it. Because with it being an MG, there's rust. If you haven't got rust, it's not an MG. I think it's just a characteristic of the vehicle. So if Jake wants to come down and have a look, I shall put them up there so he can kneel down, and I'll show you what we did. or what Harry did. So these box sections here, there's one either side, and this is for the subframe. And what happened on removal of the subframe and engine assembly, these bolts snapped in there. So Harry, bless him, got all this open because they're caged nuts, cut it all out, welded some nuts in there and welded it all back together. All along here, they were just like sandwich seams, you know, the metal's just together. There's nothing in there to protect it from rust. So water gets in and it'll rot even more. So he's put some seam sealer all over these joints, wrapped it, and he's done all the engine bay up to this line. And it looks absolutely fantastic. It's going to totally future-proof the car so the customer won't have any issues at a later date, which is fantastic for him. The Forester is now ready for collection. Nick mentioned about doing the murdered outlook or drug dealer spec. It's not full-blown drug dealer spec because we haven't got black wheels. If it was black on black on black on black on black, then yeah, drug dealer. But this guy shouldn't get pulled over by the police for selling drugs because they're bronze wheels. It's been through the detailing bay with Chris. It's been ceramic coated, and I don't know if you agree, I think it looks fantastic. The transformation it's gone through is awesome. What we've also done, if Jay comes around the front, a customer request, we've de-chromed it. So the lads up at Retropower have painted the bonnet, painted a brand new bumper, painted a brand new wing. They've also painted all the chrome in a nice satin black. So this bit here, that was chrome, and this bezel around the fog light, that was also chrome. When it was all put back together, we looked at it and it's like, it needs something else. It just didn't look right. So I spoke to Andy down at Signs and Graphics, just down the road from us, and we got some tint done on headlights. So now it's just took the brightness away from the chrome. It's just dulled it down a bit, which is kind of following suit with the look of the car. He's also de-chromed all the window trims along the side and up round the back. That's been done in a satin black vinyl. I think it looks brilliant. I'm hoping the customer's going to love it. I can't see why he won't, because it does look brilliant. We've also tinted the rear lights, and it is just a very, very light smoke. It's nothing that's going to impact nighttime driving or anything like that. But I think it just adds to the rest of the theme that the customer's gone for. So that's that. What else have I done? Would you believe Lexus, you can't get a power steering pump? Well, you know, of all vehicles that we see, I'd expect the IS to be the vehicle that we can get an abundance of parts. No, not a power steering pump. Can't get a genuine one because they no longer do them. You can't get a non-gen one because it's wrong. So we've had a nightmare with that, but I found a company down in Bristol who refurb power steering pumps, and they said they can do it. So that is currently down in Bristol with them. The 996, is it Porsche? Porsche. Anyway, the 996 is going through its detailing stage with Chris. Chris has also brought in his quality control officer, who's sat down in a corner. Do you want to say hello, Frank? Say hello to the camera. Yeah, he's here making sure Chris is doing a good job. I haven't heard him complain yet, but I think there's a few sweets flowing around, so I think it sweetens the deal a little bit, keeps him quiet. Mercedes, not really anything changed, I don't think, from last week, apart from it's on the floor, spacers are on, wheels look mint, proper mint. The final print of the twin intake setup is done. So as you can remember, previously these were the prototypes and these are the finished product. Currently waiting on Luke at the CAD crash. Those two young lads, making me feel old. Waiting for Luke to finish off the rest of the piping. I think we're only waiting on one because the printer broke. So that should be next week. So hopefully, engine bay wise, you'll see a massive transformation. So that, I'm kind of looking forward to that because it's been kind of a long time waiting for it to happen. But yes, that's that. Got to take driver's seat out of that for James so he can finish trimming that. And then the interior won't be far done apart from the veneering, which takes some time, so we're waiting for that to come back. Apart from that, I think we are done. I have got one question to ask you lot. Now, we always talk about cars that we love and, you know, oh, these are amazing, this, that and the other. Nobody ever talks about the cars that they detest the most. What I'd like to know is, what car have you owned and driven that you hated? You know, just full blown, couldn't stand it. Mine was a BMW X1D M Sport. I think I had it 6 weeks tops. I just couldn't gel with it. It was horrible. It's just, no, just vile. But anyway, I'd love to know your points on that. Right. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to hand you up to James and he can take you round Ellie's workshop. Thanks.
Well, thanks Taj, thanks for that, as he's now been nicknamed from the comments, which is hilarious. Welcome back to the trim shop. This week I have finished the centre console in the 500 SEC. Jamie will clip to some videos of that now. Really happy with that came out. I was a bit worried about the bit that curves into the dash, about getting it round there, but it's gone really, really well. Really happy with that. It looks good in there. I've put a little blue insert into it as well. That's not final yet, but it looks quite good, so we'll probably keep that in. Just ties the blue into the middle of the car, so that's looking really nice. On Friday last week, I went and carpeted the Allegro. Really, really happy with how that's come out. That looks superb. So many shades of brown in there. It looks proper, of keeping with the era, and brown interiors just look great for me, so I'm really happy with that. And then mainly focused on Churchill. So you just saw these as flat pieces of foam last week, so I've now started cutting them up, shaping some bolsters to try and match the front seats. I've given this a little bit of a chamfer on there to again tie it in. The seam will hopefully run down there with the top sewing, some top sewing around here to match the front seats, and yeah, the quilting. And yeah, and speaking of quilting, I'm now going to hand for the first time to Ellie, so let's see what she's got to say about them.
Hi, working on the quilting for Churchill. We are doing the diamonds, and what we've decided to do is sandwich the foam between the leather and this non-woven, because it gives the stitching a little bit of resistance, so it's got something to pull against and creates these nice deep diamonds once it's all stitched, instead of it being able to concave in on itself. They're going to look really nice when they're done. I'm enjoying the channels for the stitching to give it more definition. I'm going to hand back to Luke now. Bye.
Thanks, Ellie. I think she did a pretty good job there, even though she was really nervous. I'm not going to do it, I'm not going to do it. No, if I can do it, anyone can do it. Yeah, whatever. So yes, I'd like to say thank you very much for all logging on. Feel free to like and subscribe. We'd love some more subscribers on the channel, just boost those numbers up. And I'd also like to say thank you to Jamie. Jamie is an outstanding guy. He comes down here all the time, somehow makes us sound interesting. God knows how he does that. But top work, Jamie, and thanks very much. See you next week.